So are you bothered by the fact that the new Speaker of the House, a guy named Mike Johnson, has supposedly very little experience? No, I know. You're like, of course not. I mean, why would I give a hoot about that? Well, the political class, the Beltway crowd, is telling you that I don't know about this guy, Mike Johnson. I mean, he has had the second shortest House tenure before his first speakership at 6.8 years. He was elected back in 2016. Oh, my
6
goodness.
6 years is not enough.
Oh, boy. You got to be
like
there.
Too many.
Yeah, exactly.
4 out, bro.
There's John calling for term limits at 6:21 on a
Sort of.
Thursday morning. But, the only guy who had a shorter term in Congress before becoming Speaker of the House is a man named John Carlisle, first elected December 3rd of 1883. That's even before John's time. Sheesh, that's going back. 1883. So this was a big talking point yesterday from the naysayers for Mike Johnson. He's the new Speaker of the House. Now, I didn't really know a lot about Mike Johnson. I had no reason to know a lot about Mike Johnson. And frankly, that's part of the reason that he's Speaker of the House. No one really knows him. When they put these names up, Steve Scalise, after Kevin McCarthy got blown out, Jim Jordan, all these guys had baggage. They had been around forever. So that means the longer you're around, the more enemies you have. Mike Johnson's like the new kid on the block, right? No one really loves him necessarily, but no one hates him either, right? He's kind of unknown. That was the best thing he had going for him. No one really knew him. And he's pretty conservative. And he's well-liked. So that's why Mike Johnson got the job. After Republicans spun their wheels for the last, 2, 3, 4 weeks, trying to figure out who was going to replace Kevin McCarthy. But am I in any way bothered by the fact that Mike Johnson has only been in the House of Representatives for 7 years? Goodness gracious, no. No. I mean, if we can get more people in power in D.C. who haven't been hanging around since, 1975, like somebody, in charge.
What are we talking about?
I'd be much better off. I'd feel much better about things.
What does most distinguished Speaker of the House get you anyway? Free cup of coffee down at the cafeteria? I mean, what are we talking about, right?
That is so true. I mean, do you want Nancy Pelosi 2.0, who's been hanging around this thing for, literally?
Oh, she's on the Mount Rushmore of Speakers of the House.
Oh, gosh, please.
The whole concept is silly.
It is. Tell these people to get a number and go away. Gosh, go find some hobbies, please. Leave us alone, geriatrics. It's unbelievable. So Mike Johnson is a man who is not Jim Jordan conservative, if you're kind of ranking them based on conservative, but he's certainly a conservative. There's no doubt about that. And if you had any questions about that, well, know that what his critics are already calling him is MAGA Mike. Oh, it's MAGA Mike.
Such a nice man.
Yeah. Sure Trump is thrilled by that, by the way. They're calling him MAGA Mike. So you're going to see a lot of people who are running for re-election in more swing districts as Republicans who voted for this guy, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, to be the next Speaker of the House. And their Democratic opponents are going to be like, yes, Bob Smith voted for MAGA Mike. That's going to be the talking point. That's where this is going. I don't think it's going to work because what I heard yesterday from Mike Johnson was not only a pretty reasonable guy, but also a guy who has a lot of common sense, and he's a man of faith as well.
I want to tell all my colleagues here what I told the Republicans in that room last night. I don't believe there are any coincidences in a matter like this. I believe that Scripture, the Bible, is very clear, that God is the one that raises up those in authority. He raised up each of you, all of us. And I believe that God has ordained and allowed each one of us to be brought here for this specific moment in this time. This is my belief. I believe that each one of us has a huge responsibility today to use the gifts that God has given us to serve the extraordinary people of this great country, and they deserve it.
I heard Mike Johnson basically get compared to a Southern Mike Pence, which I'm fine with that. Mike Pence, of course, came from Indiana. He served in Congress before being governor and then, of course, being Trump's VP. So he's basically a Southern Mike Pence. Now, that's not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that this is going to hurt Republicans in swing districts like a lot of people do. There's this belief that now that Mike Johnson is the speaker of most people do not wake up every day and give one rip about who the Speaker of the House is.
Bingo.
They don't care. We're talking about it here on this show because, well, we just found one yesterday. I really didn't talk about this all week. I wasn't doing the blow-by-blow on voting for Speaker of the House because you just don't care. Today, of course, it's a news story because people want to know who this guy is and how he's going to run the place. And the answer on how he's going to run the place is no one really knows, right? No one has any idea. He hasn't done this before. He hasn't had this kind of power before. He's still a new face, relatively speaking, in Washington, D.C. I mean, if you've been there less than 10 years, you're basically a baby when it comes to the Beltway. So we don't know. But what we do know is that he's well-liked by all factions of the Republican Party. That's important. He's a man of faith. He made that very clear in his speech yesterday. And as far as I can tell, he's got a lot of common sense, too, like when I heard him talking about the border.
In all of our communities, children and even adults are dying from it. The status quo is unacceptable. Inaction is unacceptable, and we must come together and address the broken border. We have to do it.
By the way, that line got a standing ovation from Republicans. Democrats sat there. How you could sit there and not even clap when he just says, hey, we've got a broken border, based on what's happening around the world, based on the fact that we know there are terrorists trying to get into this country from our southern border, how you could just sit there. I know you got to be partisan with these things, but that line, there is nothing partisan about that line based on the world that we've got today. So I am cheering for Mike Johnson. It has been an ugly couple of weeks, but in the end, looks like they got a pretty good guy. How can he govern? That remains to be seen. 913-408-7957 is how you join us here on KCMO Talk Radio. News coming up in 2 minutes. We might have a UAW agreement as well. There's a lot of news. We'll get to that next. Well, here we go. After 6 weeks on strike, it looks like the UAW has reached a tentative deal with Ford. So that's only one of the big three. That would be the first domino to fall. But UAW and Ford, as of last night, have reached a tentative agreement that could end a nearly 6-week strike. Now, this first came down from CNBC last night, and it does include a 25% pay increase over the terms of the agreement. The two sides, of course, have been at the negotiating table for weeks, but really picked up their conversations over the last couple of days. So here's what we know based on CNBC, who had this reporting first. 25% pay increases over the terms of the agreement and will cumulatively raise the top wage to more than $40 an hour, including an increase of 68% for starting wages to over $28 an hour. It also includes reinstatement of cost of living adjustments, a 3-year path to top wages, and a right to strike over plant closures, among other significantly enhanced benefits. The tentative deal still must be approved by local UAW leaders and then ratified by a simple majority of Ford's 57,000 union-represented workers. The union will hold informational meetings as well as online briefings to discuss the specifics of the agreement, which will be posted online with summaries. So we're still waiting for some of the official details. I know we got a lot of folks in the audience who work at the Clay Como plant here in town, which is a Ford plant, has not shut down at any point during this 6-week strike. Clay Como was never called to strike and was never impacted enough where they were shut down, like what happened at the Fairfax GM plant on the Kansas side of the state line. But I'm curious. I mean, you know, we've had a lot of people call this show over the last month or so who have obviously disagreed with me on my stance on this strike. I have been vehemently opposed to Shawn Fain, the head of the UAW, not because I don't think he should try to get his members a raise, but because his ask was completely asinine and out of control. 40% pay raises, 4-day work weeks. I mean, go to Sweden if you want that. But also because he came off to me like a very political actor with what he said, with how he spoke. I mean, he sounded like a Bernie Sanders wannabe with some of his comments. And then, when Trump went up there to Michigan and wanted to do a rally and support the workers, Sean Fain basically dissed Donald Trump, which I don't really care if you diss Donald Trump. I mean, people do that across the aisle all the time. But it showed to me that he is very much a political figure, because part of the reason that his members don't have the disposable income that they had even 3 years ago is because of the policies of this administration and this White House. And you can't have an honest conversation about, well, we need more money. Wages got to go up because the dollar's not going as far. You can't say that and then not point and put at least some blame on the people in charge right now. And Sean Fain refused to do that, but he was also very critical of Donald Trump and Republicans. It's like, if he was going to be critical of both parties, I would have respected that to some degree. But he wasn't. He was only critical of one party, despite the fact that the party that he was siding with in all this is a big reason that his working class members can't get ahead right now. So if you're somebody who, has been in the UAW, and we had many of you call in who were either former members, current members, and disagree with me on this, I'm just curious if you're satisfied with the deal as you see right now being reported by CNBC. I know that nobody has seen all the specific details at this point in time. That has not been put out there yet. I guess they're going to post them online with summaries. But as you hear it right now, is it time for this thing to end? Is it time to get back to work? If nothing else, as I noted last week, and I believe Ray Stevens noted this on his show from 10 to noon, with the way the world has been the last couple of weeks, this story had fallen by the wayside. Sean Fain was not going to get the public sympathy that he was getting from media cohorts early on. And he had just lost that, right? I mean, all the focus from national media has obviously been on what's going on the other side of the world in the wake of the attack on Israel. So suddenly Sean Fain was pushed to the back burner, and that wasn't good for him because he needed the media to be his friend here in all this. He needed a sympathetic national media to say, oh, come on, help the workers, Ford and GM and Stellantis. Come on, you guys got to do your job. Well, they weren't doing that the last couple of weeks. So it behooved him to get a deal done, and it looks like he's done that, at least with Ford, John. The other two are still out there and waiting to be seen what happens there.
Got a game plan while that news cycle is ticking. It's like the 2-minute drill in football here.
Yeah.
You got to go, okay, let's do corporate greed. Okay. Well, dude, we're at halftime, and that hasn't worked too much. Good pushback. What do we got? Trump.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But here's I love that analogy, but here's what makes it even worse. It's like running a 2-minute drill, but the game might end with 1 minute left if the media moves on.
Mm-hmm.
The
news cycle is running out. When that runs out, you better start screaming Trump to get back in.
Yeah. And even that really hasn't worked for him the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
So that's a great point. So now what happens with GM? They're next. And that matters a lot more to us here locally because still this Fairfax plant has been shut down. It's been shut. Gosh, it's got to be 4 weeks now. It's been shut down. The Fairfax plant over on the Kansas side. Because it was the Wentzville, Missouri plant on the St. Louis side of the state. That plant was one of the first GM plants that was told to strike.
One of the first 3 they picked.
Yes.
They targeted 3.
Right out of the gates. Yeah. So that impacted the Fairfax plant here in our backyard because I guess they were getting parts and supplies from the Wentzville plant. So once the Wentzville plant went on strike, suddenly the Fairfax plant had no work. So all those people are not working and haven't been working for the better part of a month. But it's not just them. It's the mom and pop businesses, the restaurants, the coffee shops around the Fairfax plant. They're used to having hundreds of people go to their locations on a daily basis. They are hurting beyond belief right now. And that's a fallout of this that it got attention on the local news for like a couple of days because we covered it and we carried some of the packages. Some of those small business owners out there who are like, yeah, this is really going to hurt us. I mean, most of their business is the men and women who work at the Fairfax plan. And they have been hurting for the better part of a month. Of course, no one talks about them. There's going to be no back pay for those folks or those businesses. But hey, don't let that get in the way of a good story. Sean Fain just dragged 57,000 UAW members through this looking for a 4-day work week. Listen, I hope he's satisfied to some degree. We'll have to see what happens, though, when it comes to the cost for Ford. Here's the problem for the big three. They are already becoming less competitive every single day compared to their foreign competitors. We went through these numbers a month ago. But right now, the big three, and this is before this new deal, they're paying about $68 an hour on average for their labor. And that includes benefits and everything else. Whereas Honda and Toyota, they're at about $45, $50, and then Tesla's down around $40 an hour. So these non-union shops, these non-union companies who continue, by the way, to penetrate the American market in a very positive way with high-quality vehicles, they are running a much more efficient operation than the big three are. And while we all want to buy in America and buy American, I mean, we all want to do that, it's not that easy anymore in many respects. And on top of that, Toyota has plenty of plants here in America. Tesla, plenty of plants here in America. Ford, by the way, has plants in Mexico. So while we see the American brand and we want to buy America, it's not as simple as Ford American, Toyota Japanese. It's not. And those companies, the Hondas, the Toyotas, the Kias of the world, they are coming in hot and heavy with much better products over the last, several years in particular. So I'll be intrigued to see how this impacts the big three. And by the way, if you are in the market for a vehicle, how does this impact your potential purchasing power? Because you look right now, if you have a big family, the cost of a Suburban, the base level cost of a Suburban, you know what it is? I looked it up the other day. I just want to make sure I have the exact number here for you. The base level cost of a Suburban starts at $57,200. My in-laws were here a couple of weeks ago, and their family car, they had a Suburban since they had 4 kids. And I asked my father-in-law, I said, hey, what was the cost of that Suburban? Do you remember? I mean, this was going back, it's probably a 20-year-old Suburban now. They don't have it anymore. But I said, what was the cost of that Suburban? And he said it was probably in the 30 to 35 range. In 20 years, the cost of a Suburban has nearly doubled. That is unsustainable. And it's something that the Detroit Big Three are going to have to figure out here. 913-408-7957. 913-408-7957. I want to welcome you into the conversation here on KCMO Talk Radio as this UAW strike looks like it's coming to an end, at least with Ford. And now we wait to see what happens with GM and Stellantis. We're, of course, on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7. Yeah, on the text line, this is the problem that Ford and the Big Three are going to be facing if and when they do come to this deal with the UAW. And it looks like Ford and the UAW have tentatively reached an agreement. So now it's just GM and Stellantis left. But here on the text line, 913-408-7957, Pete, my 2002 F-350 crew cab, long bed, leather interior, all the bells and whistles cost me $31,000. That same truck today is over $80,000. That is not sustainable. And I'm not saying it's all because of labor costs, or that's not the case. Labor is not the majority of what goes into a vehicle, but it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. So I wanted to welcome you into the conversation here. Dustin's in Blue Springs. What's up, Dustin? Good morning.
Morning. You're talking about how this affected the local businesses and all that, but it's actually it affects much more than that. I'm in the auto body industry, and we're having a hard time getting parts for these cars because they're on strike. And the last time this happened in 2019, I mean, I can't remember how long that went, but I mean, we were depleting everybody's inventory trying to locate parts all over the country. It was a freaking mess.
Well, and that's because you just can't get the parts. So now people who own these vehicles and need to get them fixed, they're getting hosed as well. I didn't think about those people.
Yeah, we had one at the insurance company had a total because we couldn't get a roof for it because of the strike. And I mean, the very repairable car, it was damaged from the hailstorm, but couldn't get a roof for it. And because we had no idea when the strike was going to end, we were going to get it, the insurance company decided just to total the car.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So now how long is it going to take to ramp back up? Let's say the strike does end here in the next week or so. I mean, I assume the next day you don't start getting the parts. What's the ramp-up process? Another few weeks?
Well, yeah, because when you have this bunch of orders for parts coming in, they basically the first come, first serve, first set of orders that were put in. They're the first one to get it. So if you're one of the last ones that put in an order for parts, you're going to be the last ones to get it once they start ramping things back up.
Sheesh. So you're not expecting anything when it comes to normal inventory for several weeks, fair to say?
Probably at least 2 or 3 months.
Wow. That is crazy. And that's got to impact. So you're in auto repair independently or at a dealership?
Well, I'm in a corporate run shop, a nationwide body shop chain.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it affects everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work in a dealership body shop, and in 2019, and yeah, it was a mess.
Wow. Thank you for that, Dustin. I appreciate the insight. That is, I kind of forgot about that angle of this, but it brings me, as Dustin was sharing that, it made me think of a story from literally last week where a buddy of mine who has a GM truck, something went wrong. I don't know anything about cars. If I could snap my fingers and have one skill set, it would be knowing vehicles and fixing cars. It would be Dustin. Literally, if I could snap my fingers and have one skill set, it would be knowing what's wrong with cars, identifying them, and then fixing them. I've always, appreciated people who can do that. So a buddy of mine 2 weeks ago, he's got a GM truck. He's like, oh, gosh, my truck's all, something wrong with it. It's like a $2,000 fix. And he said the worst part is they're saying he can't get it fixed till December. December. It was a week and a half ago. He said they were 6 weeks out. And at the time, he's telling me the story, and I'm just kind of listening to him complain because he wanted to hear somebody listen to his plight. And I didn't really think about the why. But I kind of assumed it was, they must be short-staffed like everybody else is. They don't have the time. But I kind of forgot about the fact that it also could be in large part parts-related. They just can't get the parts because of the strikes that are taking place. And now, if you're in the car market today and you're going to buy a vehicle, it's got to cross your mind, right? Like, if I own this vehicle in 3, 4, 5, 6 years and these guys go on strike just like they did back in 2019 and again this year, and something goes wrong with my car and I got to leave in the shop for 2 months because these guys want a 40% pay raise and 4-day work weeks, well, geez, you hate to think like that, but you'd be foolish not to think like that, right? To think, oh, my goodness, if something goes wrong with my car and it just so happens to be when these individuals are on strike, I could be out of a car for 2 months. And in this town in Kansas City, you can't be out of a car for 2 months, right? You're not going to be able to go anywhere. I'm going to be bumming rides off Mark to get to work if that's the case.
No, that's a good point. We talk about how big the area is and law enforcement stuff. Yeah, it's tough to live in this market and rely on public transportation.
That is exactly right.
You need a car.
You need one. You got to be able to get around. And just to give you some, new data points as well in terms of the cost of these vehicles skyrocketing, the average GM car price is $52,000. The average new monthly car payment is $750. The number of weeks you got to work to pay for a new car is 42. That is unsustainable. And that is not all the fault of the UAW. I'm not blaming the union for those numbers. There's a lot of economic things that have happened that have caused that to take place. But buying a car is not even what it was 10 years ago. And with UAW coming to an end with Ford on this strike, and now we wait for GM and Stellantis. None of this is going to help the price of cars. I'll leave it at that for now. At all. Mayor Lucas will be here at 7:30. Dayton Moore at 8 o'clock. Mark Alford at 8:30. Coming up, the best answer that I heard from a local meeting that took place this week that we haven't yet touched on. I'll share that with you coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7. Well, the manhunt continues in Maine for Robert Card. He is the person of interest after a deadly mass shooting there last night. We're expecting a press conference at 9:30 our time this morning from authorities up there in Maine. So we'll be monitoring this, unfortunately, throughout the morning here on KCMO Talk Radio. The numbers that we've seen most recently, 22 people dead, 30 wounded. This press conference, once again, expected for about 2.5 hours from now. Robert Card, 40 years old, of Bowden, Maine, is the person of interest. And he is considered armed and dangerous. Somebody who did have an Army Reserve background, stationed up there in Maine. So we're learning more about him as the morning goes along. But obviously that is a person right now who is still on the run, and authorities are actively looking for him. I got to imagine up and down the East Coast. But we'll be picking up pieces of that press conference, I'm sure, in about 2.5 hours here on KCMO. So welcome in on a Thursday morning. Now, locally, on a much lighter note, we didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday. Just we had so much going on yesterday on the show. We had the gender reveal, goodness gracious. Found out we were having our third girl yesterday at 8:30 here on KCMO Talk Radio. And if you want to see that video, it is up on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page. I've got it up on my personal Instagram page at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. So it is in all of our KCMO Talk Radio social media accounts and also on my personal account in case you follow me there. So be sure to find it. It's on the Instagram stories, the posts. It's everywhere. So you can see it for yourself. But Tuesday night, there was a debate in Prairie Village. And there's been a lot of focus on Prairie Village with this Stop Rezoning PV movement. You've got all these council members who think that what Prairie Village residents want is more R2, R3, R4, which, of course, is not what they want. You don't live in Prairie Village because you want to live next to a condo unit. You don't live in Prairie Village because you want high rises. You live in Prairie Village because of what Prairie Village is. That's what makes Prairie Village appealing. That's why people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to the millions of dollars on homes in Prairie Village, right? So the Stop Rezoning PV movement has been incredibly effective. They are as coordinated a movement against the apartment complex movement that has overtaken municipalities across Johnson County as any movement we've seen over the last couple of years. And they have multiple people who are running for city council, and they have their elections coming up here in a couple of weeks. So the Shawnee Mission Post puts on this debate forum for the candidates Tuesday night. And this question from the Shawnee Mission Post, I'm going to play this clip from KCTV5, is a ridiculous question from, what's his name there? I think it's Kyle Palmer at the Shawnee Mission Post. And by the way, just so we're all on the same page and just so it's out in the open, the Shawnee Mission Post is backing the apartment complex people. They won't say they are. I don't know if they do endorsements. I don't much care. But just know that they are fully supportive of the incumbents there in Prairie Village. They'll pretend, just like the Star, that they're a news outlet and they're just covering the news. They are very sympathetic to the apartment complex people who want to keep jamming apartments and rezoning parts of Prairie Village. They're on their team. Just they'll deny it, but just know they're on their team. So anyway, here's part of the KCTV package from the other night. And I thought this answer from one of the guys running against the incumbents, his name is Tyler Annual. I thought it was a great answer. Take a listen.
The editor of the Shawnee Mission Post, who moderated tonight's forum, asked what candidates would suggest doing to make home ownership in the city more attainable. One new candidate said nothing.
I honestly don't know if there's anything I would do to address the rising housing costs in Prairie Village.
I mean, that's a great blunt answer. And we had that guy on the show a few weeks ago, Tyler Annual. And it's like, yeah, it is not the job of the city council to try to figure out how to make your community more affordable, because there's nothing you can do outside of do what they're trying to do, which is jam apartments in there. Prairie Village is a small community, right? But it's also a very dense community already, one of the densest communities in the state of Kansas. So it's not like they've got a lot of free space. That will pop up an apartment complex here, an apartment complex there, and we'll be off to the races. Density is not a problem in Prairie Village. Prairie Village is a highly sought-after community because of its location, because of its schools, because of its public safety, for a lot of reasons. We're going to be there next week, by the way, for our Back the Blue tour, which we are very excited about. So, all these things lead to Prairie Village being a highly desirable area. And what happens when you have a highly desirable area? Your price goes up. Never mind in this climate where you could sell a doghouse for $100,000. It's crazy. But it's not the job of the city council to be like, oh, how do we become more welcoming and build structures for all people? No, that's not your role. Your role as a city council is to serve the people who live there and let the free market determine how desirable your community is. That's it. That is the extent of your role as government. And hopefully, by providing good basic services, having a police force, keeping crime low, picking up the trash, just doing all the basic things, snow removal, trash, potholes, that you help the community become a desirable place that drives up the cost of homes in your municipality, and then you let the chips fall where they may in the free market. It is not your job as a city council to try to figure out how you have all these different pockets of different socioeconomic levels and you try to engineer a city as you see fit. That's not your role, but these people think it is. These people on the Prairie Village City Council believe that it is their job to engineer the Prairie Village that they want to see, instead of just being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and providing the Prairie Village resident quality and high-end services at a reasonable rate that encourages more people to want to move there when they can afford it. Most people can't afford Prairie Village. That's okay. There are many other places to live. I don't live in Prairie Village. It's a great community. I don't begrudge anybody who does. But I certainly don't want local governments and city councils being like, we've got to engineer this town to look more like we want it to be. No, that's not your job. But if you say what that council candidate Tyler Annual just said there, basically being like, no, it's not our role to try to figure out more affordable housing. It's really not the job of the city council to do that, to try to impact housing prices and drive them down to make it more affordable. Why would you want to do that, by the way? Why would that ever be a goal, to try to figure out how to potentially drive down the value of homes in Prairie Village? That has got to be the dumbest idea I've ever heard. But for people who think that they're not just on a city council to, be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, but they are there to engineer the city that they want to see, right? That has more affordable options. Well, that's how you end up with a Prairie Village City Council that you got right now. So those elections in a couple of weeks are going to be huge. But when I heard that line, I was like, that is gold. That is well done. And by the way, that guy, he's got no political background. He's just a dad in Prairie Village. And we need more people like that getting involved in local politics. We're just going to be like, nah, that's not our job, not our role. 913-408-7957 as we approach 7:15 on a busy Thursday morning on KCMO. The mayor of Kansas City is going to be here coming up at 7:35. So don't miss that. On 95.7 FM. Hit that preset here on KCMO. We got a lot to get to the mayor on. He has been very, very busy on Twitter this morning. So it should be a good conversation 20 minutes away. I'm going to want your input on something else here this hour. We'll get to that next. Well, this is a very interesting question on the text line, and I want to address it here as we were just talking about Prairie Village, the fact that, they have been ground zero for the apartment debate that is impacting especially Johnson County, but it's got impacts in suburban parts of not just the entire Kansas City region, but around the country. Pete, wait a minute. Isn't Prairie Village very liberal? So it's okay for the rest of Johnson County to have low-income apartments, but not Prairie Village. Now, yes, there is some hypocrisy there, right? It reminds me of the hypocrisy from Martha's Vineyard when Ron DeSantis conveniently sent a bunch of illegal immigrants there, and then it was like, whoa, Prairie, you can't have them up here in Martha's Vineyard. And they conveniently shoot them off the island. Don't get me wrong, there's some of that. But there's also, because I moderated the first Prairie Village City Council debate 3 weeks ago now. And there's a lot of people there who are like-minded. Now, you got to understand, sometimes we're all guilty of this. We'll review the world in this like white, black, red, blue system that we've created. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that Prairie Village has a lot of Donald Trump fans. They don't. But they have common sense thinkers who, when it comes to this issue in particular, they're like, hey, this isn't good for me and this is not good for my family. They might view the world a little bit differently on some of the worldwide issues and national issues from you and maybe me in some respects. I don't know. I don't really care. But this issue in particular should be a rallying cry. And what they've done very effectively in Prairie Village can be used and can be a blueprint for other people in other parts of the Kansas City metro who are also getting impacted in a big way by their own city councils who are just jamming apartments wherever they can. Overland Park, Olathe come to mind, but it's Lenexa. It's happening all over Johnson County mostly, but I know people in Lee's Summit dealing with this as well. And they're doing it for two reasons. Democrats think it's good for their voting bloc, and Republicans are too stupid to realize what's going on. And they're just like, well, that's free market, right? No, it's not free market when you guys willy-nilly rezone R1 to R4, and then you give tax breaks on top of it to developers who probably would have built there anyway. That's not free market, geniuses. That's you giving tax breaks to developers who then are donating to your campaigns. Mike is in Olathe. He's on KCMO. Hello, Mike. Good morning.
Yeah, what you said and more, what Bill O'Reilly just described in New York is what I was just about to go to, is Barack Obama's America. 2007, Charlie Gibson, during a debate, when he explained, he basically said, look, the capital gains tax gets lowered, revenues to the federal government increase, and people live higher standards of living. Senator Obama, well, you've said that you would raise the capital gains tax, even though these facts are pretty concrete. I'm paraphrasing. He goes, well, it's all about fairness, Charlie. What's fairness? Is fairness this dystopian thought that nobody has aspiration, nobody can start low and go high, $28 an hour for minimum wage, whatever the number is? We've lost the idea that you have to aspire, if you want to live in Prairie Village, just to be an aspiration. And then why do you hurt the citizens? I don't get that either. Why do you hurt the people that live there, just like you explained? I think there's been this thing the last 10, 20 years to try and eliminate suburbs. And I think that's what's happening through city council. Some of these people, I think, are doing it unbeknownst to that
yes,
fact. They're
I agree.
Doing it thinking it's good. I don't think they're that smart necessarily, but they're not thinking when they're doing this.
I agree. They're not. I totally agree with that, Mike. I don't think there's bad faith for a lot of these people. I just don't think they know what they're doing. I think their hearts actually, for some of them, not all of them, I think some of them have bad motivations. But a lot of them are just going along to get along, and it sounds good and, makes them feel good. And, they're not that bright, to be blunt. And they're like, yeah, this is nice. But then more importantly on what Mike said there, when it comes to aspirations, he's right. Isn't America all about aspiring to something? If you want to aspire to own a home in Prairie Village one day, that's something that really just, oh, gosh, you have, wanted your whole life to live in Prairie Village. Well, then theoretically, you'll sacrifice, you'll do something, you'll get into a line of work that allows you to live that dream if that is that important to you. Now, it's probably not to most of us, but if that's your thing, there's nothing in America that says that you can't try to achieve it. You might not get there, but you got every right to try to achieve it. The notion that it's on the government to create a system that allows you to live in Prairie Village as if it's some type of birthright to own property or own a place in Prairie Village. And that is just ludicrous. And it's anti-American at its core in many ways. So that is two very good points there from Mike. Very good. On the text line, 913-408-7957. 95.7 FM sounds great. Well, thank you very much.
Such a nice man.
Although I don't know if that came from a man or a woman. So
she's a real beauty.
I'll double down on that for you, male or female. Well, thank you very much for that. It has been 2 weeks today. Can you believe it? 2 weeks today that we made that flip to 95.7 FM. I cannot believe it. It is flying by. How about that? Well, still following, of course, the breaking news out of Maine, where a shooter has left at least a couple of dozen dead, nearly 3 dozen injured, and the individual, Robert Card, the suspect, is still on the run. They have identified him as the person of interest in that shooting rampage. We do not have any more information at this time, outside of the fact that he is obviously considered armed and dangerous, based on what happened up there in Maine last night. Robert Card is 40 years old. He was in the Army Reserve. He also was put in for mental health issues and spent time dealing with mental health issues this summer. So this is somebody who, according to media reports, was hearing voices and things like that during his time in the mental health facility over the summer, where he spent 2 weeks before being released. So we don't really know a lot right now. There's a press conference that's going to happen at about 9:30 this morning. So we'll be sure to keep tabs on that here on KCMO Talk Radio. In the meantime, I mean, the news cycle, just a lot going on right now. You got a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Louisiana. That was voted on yesterday. Mark Alford's going to be here in 10 minutes to talk about that selection and the entire process of the last few weeks for Republicans, which has certainly been interesting to say the least. But the media reaction to this has been incredibly predictable. So here's a guy in Mike Johnson who is, yes, a conservative. He's not what you would call a moderate in the Republican caucus. He is a conservative. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to get everything that he wants. It doesn't really change the makeup of the House, which has the Republicans with a 4 to 5 seat majority. So the notion that he's going to be able to cram through all these super conservative pieces of legislation is just simply not true. Like, he doesn't have the numbers to do that. But it doesn't matter. The fear-mongering is already out in full force. Here's the headline. This is, by the way, a news piece. News analysis from the New York Times, okay?
Fake news.
This is not an opinion piece. This is news analysis. It says it here on the New York Times website, news analysis. Here's the headline. The far right gets its man of the House. Oh, the far spooky, scary. Halloween's around the corner. The far right gets its man. The new speaker, Mike Johnson, writes the New York Times, is virtually unknown to most Americans, but he can be expected to press a hard right social and fiscal agenda. Oh,
how dare you?
Gosh, it's so It doesn't change the makeup of the House, John. This is all fear-mongering.
I'm wondering how many badges you have to get to be far right, and is there like a service of excellence to be a MAGA? You get the communications badge and the activity badge and the civics. You attended a couple of city council meetings.
What makes you far right?
Do you go from far right to MAGA?
Oh my god!
And then there was hard right, wasn't there? So we got hard, far, and MAGA.
Yes. In the end, right?
I'm curious on the variations.
New York Times, Republican hardliners got their man.
It's kind of like the difference between like pink and shrimp. And
they're right here.
Salmon color.
Yeah. He wasn't the person whom the most extreme element of the House Republicans really wanted. That was Jim Jordan, the godfather of the far right in the House, who ultimately was too toxic to ascend to the top post. But the new speaker, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, a man unknown to most Americans, is a second choice the far right can enthusiastically embrace. So if that's the case, then why did the moderates also rally around this guy? The moderates who didn't want Jim Jordan. They also rally around Mike Johnson. Once again, I'm not denying that Mike Johnson is a conservative. But another kind of talking point is like, why is it only if the Republicans have a conservative as Speaker of the House, we talk about this far right, but then what is Nancy Pelosi? Anyone? Like, okay. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is a diehard liberal, and she's allowed to be one, right? She was Speaker of the House. She's allowed to be a liberal. But it's interesting how we only worry about extremes as Speaker of the House when it's on one side of the aisle. By the way, I want to thank you for the great feedback and response we got to yesterday's gender reveal here on KCMO. I want to thank John and Mark as well for holding down the fort, for playing their part in that. Of course, my girls yesterday, Kate, Claire, and Chloe, coming in for the gender reveal. It was a lot of pressure being on the radio. There were some tears involved as one of them wanted a baby brother and instead got a third girl. So Woody and I are way outnumbered now. 4-2 come March. But it was fun. And if you want to see the video, it's on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page. It's on my personal Instagram page at Pete Mundo. So it's in all those places, John.
You are firmly entrenched in a seat-down household. Never forget that. Woody can't help you.
Yeah, well, as long as I'm not sitting, then it's fine. I just got to pop it up and down, you know?
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
You, it's got to go back down.
Yeah.
There's going to be more tears.
Yeah. It's been that way for a couple of years, so I just got to keep doing what I'm doing. Keep plowing right along.
No change for Pete. Then.
Nope, none at all. Just keep it going, baby. And as someone who grew up in a house of three boys, it was a tough adjustment, but I made it. We got through it in one piece, all right? For the sake of the marriage, we got through it in one piece.
No distance marks anymore.
Then, nope. So maybe some of you feel differently, but I thought Piers Morgan, he had a really good opinion piece here this week in the New York Post that hit exactly home to what I feel about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. And the headline from Piers Morgan was, amid all the misery, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are the romantic escapism America needs right now. You know, when she first showed up at the Bears game, I found it kind of like, oh, gosh, celebrity, annoying, gossipy nonsense. And with each passing week, I love it more. Now, I know some of you are going to disagree. Some of you are going to hate it. But I like the relationship more with each passing week. And certainly, it helps me like it more as the news cycle continues to get more dramatic and, frankly, more dangerous, you know, whether it's overseas or whether this manhunt we're following this morning in Maine. This is, as Piers Morgan writes here, the romantic escapism America needs right now. I want to share a little bit of this with you, where he starts off the article saying, how was your weekend? I spent much of mine scrolling through social media, exposing myself to constant horrific imagery from the Israel-Hamas war and to an incessant barrage of vile abuse from extremists on both sides. He goes on to say, the vicious, toxic tribalism that the latest escalation in this conflict has provoked feels worse every day. But society's been heading this way for years. He adds the consequence is that we're all left searching desperately for moments of unifying relief, little rays of uncomplicated, uplifting happiness that can make us all feel good about life. Piers Morgan adds here, enter Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. The romance between the two has been as phenomenal as their careers. They've only been dating a few weeks, but it's no exaggeration to say it now feels like the whole world has a view on them. And what's seemingly unique about this celebrity relationship is that nobody seems to have a problem with it. He goes on to note, unlike Kim and Kanye, whose mutually repulsive attention-seeking narcissism ripped into our souls like a cheese grater going through a hard piece of Gouda, Taylor and Travis are intensely likable.
A little wordy there, Piers, but I get it.
You get the point he's going for.
A little cheesy.
Yeah, both individually and as a couple. And he goes on to make this case that this is in large part something America needs for relief right now. And we're all rallying around it. And I find myself doing that exact same thing. At first, I was like, oh, no, yeah. And with every passing day, I like it more. It started off with my wife, with Kate telling me about all the latest Taylor Travis stuff. Mm-hmm. And now I'm the one telling her about stuff.
We see so much stuff of, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard or Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. One of them's married there and the other one's not, apparently. Yeah. It's like all this coming apart stuff, and I like that the power couple in America has shifted from Hollywood, one of these liberal city centers where,
I get what you're saying there. Absolutely.
It's an all-American thing, middle America thing. I don't know.
It is.
Right?
Absolutely. I like them both more every day. Now, I still am going to give Travis a hard time for his Bud Light Pfizer commercials, but I like them more every day because I like the couple more every day.
I've been on board since the beginning. A lot of people said it was a fake relationship, and ever since the start, I said it was real because I knew from Travis Kelce on his podcast, he said he wants to find true love. I don't think he would do this just for fun on the side. I think that he's in it to win it, I guess you could say.
I don't think he minds the attention, but I do think he's in it for love. And I'll share this story from Ed Kelce that makes me like Taylor Swift more and more. I know, so she's a liberal. Ah! Okay, fine. She's a liberal. But until she starts trying to tell me how to vote in Kansas or Missouri, I'm going to leave that off the wayside here for a second. Here's a story that Ed Kelce shared that I put up on my Facebook page yesterday. He goes, I'll tell you something very special that I noticed about Taylor the first time I met her. We're sitting in the suite. She gets up and in the front room, she goes up to get a drink or something. And she starts picking up empty bottles, cans, plates that are scattered all around the suite. Because in the suites, everybody gets stuff and you empty it down wherever you can. Ed said, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't think she got the diva memo. She didn't get the spoiled musician memo. She doesn't know how to pull that off. And that really, to me, said a whole lot. It's small, it's anecdotal, but it's something I appreciate, if nothing else. Because that, in and of itself, is a lost art these days.